make sure to get his hour of learning. Sometimes you have to get up earlier for it. Sometimes you have to go to bed later. But it's important message. We try to fit in our learning, even if it's not so easy for us. And that's if you look at it like that, hopefully, it will not be a kitzuk. Seriously. Oh, well, the Chaim said that even the line the Beis Medrash should be open longer if necessary. I've got a book. I see my mother wrote it for us for Pesach for the family as a gift. It's called 102 Stories. Have you read it? 102 is the gematria of the words Emunah. They're unbelievable stories, but just very, very briefly. I like to read. I read a very lot. I read a few books a week. By the way, basically, it's got a story there about a certain person that was nefit and was lying on his deathbed, and he said, "I bought every single ticket to the concert." And his children were horrified. Because what happened was that the council years earlier made a mixed gathering. It was a wealthy person who was very disturbed by it. So he bought every single ticket so that not a single person should be able to come. Here you go. Interesting. It's a very interesting book, 102 stories by Nakao. Okay. We're up to, so tomorrow the share is 10 to 7. Shoot, it's along with that. Okay. We're up to the third line down on Pevov on Medalef, third of the wide lines. The Mor said yesterday there's only one Avera that even Yom Kippur, even Shuvah, even suffering cannot atone for. Which Avera is that? Avera Chil Hashem. What is Chil Hashem? Omarab, you're gonna know like I. If I take meat from the butcher, and I don't pay immediately, that is an important point. I've said this so many times in other show. That people always talk about Chil Hashem. You go on the bus to say thank you to the bus driver. Tell that to all the little children because they want them to behave nicely. The Rambam Paskas of Chil Hashem only applies to Yidam. Chil Hashem is to Yidam. Person comes to talks to davening. That's Chil Hashem. What? Rambam. And nobody argues, I'm afraid. It's very interesting to think. I was told a bit of Silverstein about 20 years ago. There was a local makolet. Makolet is a grocer.
When you go to bed.
It's on. Can you hear me, Moshe? You should be able to hear me. He's on.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Moshe, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Anyway, what happened was that people were not paying. So Makolet had a lot of credit, a lot of people owing. And he got up on Shabbat Rosh and he said, this is a classic example of Chil Hashem. Because what happens is, it shows, so to speak, a lack of caring about other people. It's Chil Hashem. We always think Chil Hashem is between Yidden and between themselves. Okay. Only in a place where the shopkeepers don't chase for money. Less than boy, if people know that the shopkeepers in town ask for system money, it's not Chil Hashem. Ravina says that Moshe Mechasa was a place where people would demand for payment. So it's not a Chil Hashem not to pay immediately. When Abai would buy meat from two different partners, and it's a shop that belongs to two partners, he would pay both, even though he only owed one of them. Why did he pay both? That people shouldn't think that he didn't pay. That he would bring the two together and make a new calculation. So let's say he bought 10 pounds of meat. We pay 10 pounds to A, 10 pounds to B. Bring the 2 partners together and then say, well, now you owe me another 10 pounds worth of meat. So much so to make sure that people shouldn't think he's not paying. If I walk for 4 hours without thinking and without learning Torah, without tefillin, that's a Chil Hashem. Says Rashi, what's the Rashi say? Rashi says, by me, it's by the end of the now lines. Not everybody knows they're not feeling well. But people learn from me not to learn properly. But Rashi was medag for the Lashon that Rav said, that Rav said, Isha Kilna, if I take. That means Rav obviously never did it. Rabbi doesn't say I. Rabbi said, that I do. But Rashi explains that Rabbi was not well. He brings a Gemara in Yerushalmi that Rabbi used to get not well certain times of the year. And even then, Rabbi Yechanan was careful that even though this happened, he still tried his best to make sure that won't cause Chilul Hashem. That his friends are embarrassed of the rumors that go around him. There's a picture of the on Yoma, and he adds that even if the rumors are unfounded, but if the rumors which are circulating are negative, that itself is Chilul Hashem. If people say about somebody that Akshvoch should forgive him for all his sins, that's a bad thing to say about somebody, and that would be a Chilul Hashem for Talmud Chacham. Again, the Rabbi Yonah says slightly different pirush. He says that his behavior is so bad, it looks like Hashem is allowing him to do whatever he wants. So that would be a Chilul Hashem. Abai Omar Kedatanya, like the Beis says. This Beis, as it is written in two places of the Rambam, both in Yad and also in Sefer Mitzvahs, in the mitzvah of Avto as Hashem Elokecha. V'Avto as Hashem Elokecha sheyesh Shemayim Yisai V'al Yodcha. You should make that the name of Hashem should be loved through you. Sheyekoyer v'shonei should learn. That's Torah and Mishnah. It's Mishamash of the Chomim and learn with the Chomim v'Masoi Matone b'Nachas. The Bach changes it. Masoi b'Emunah. They should deal with honesty. Matone b'Nachas.
After the one on the back of the door.
Behaves nicely with people. Praises his father and his Rebbe that taught him Torah. Look how nice his behavior is. You are a nation which I glorify myself through. He doesn't behave nicely. Woe to his Rebbe and his father taught him Torah. And the pasuk there says that it causes the beginning of the pasuk. It causes a Chilul Hashem. There's a tremendous message of it. Desta points this out. It's something which needs a lot of thought. We've got no time at all. And that is that if somebody behaves badly in Ben Adam LaChaveiro and in Ben Adam LaMokoim, it does not create the same Chilul Hashem as somebody who, when it comes to Ben Adam LaMokoim, is very good, but when it comes to Ben Adam LaChaveiro, is very bad. That means if you've got somebody who's always bad behaved, it doesn't create such a Chilul Hashem. It's bad behaved, fine. If you see somebody that's so long and he's got a long beard, everything else, but when it comes to the way he treats other people, he treats them badly, then that is how it creates Chilul Hashem. Because people there see a contradiction in his behavior, and they realize that his behavior is not because of Hashem, it's self-glorification, and therefore it's interesting that it can sometimes the actual keeping B'nai Mokum creates a greater Chilul Hashem. If he kept nothing, people say, okay, he finds it, he struggles. But when a person's got one without the other, that creates a certain repulsion, which creates a tremendous amount of off-putting. And what? Hypocritical. That's a good word. Yeah. Yeah. That is not the. That could be what's a derivative. It's not the main mitzvah of Chilul Hashem. It would be a derivative. Yes, it would be a Chilul Hashem. But the main mitzvah of Chilul Hashem is between Yidden. It says, you're right. I don't know if he's into Rabban on this. Learned out. Okay. Now, the next Gemara, for the next about 25 lines, the Mishnah Berurah writes that on the night of Yom Kippur, you should learn this Gemara. The night of Yom Kippur, that means after Kol Nidri, you can't go home. There's not much to go home for. After Ma'ariv, it's about 9, 10 o'clock at night. You can't go, there's nothing to eat at home. So you might as well do something. What? You can talk to wife. The Shavuot writes, interestingly enough, that one shouldn't talk too much to one's wife on the night of Yom Kippur. One shouldn't talk too much because one is forbidden to each other. And if you talk too much, you might come to a certain closeness, which the Shavuot writes. So you're limited how much you talk to wife. There's a Kaf HaChaim. Those who follow the Kaf HaChaim, the Kaf HaChaim writes that he was noyeg, that he didn't talk to his wife because of so much chashoshes of the room and things like that. It was a very big tzaddik, the Kaf HaChaim. He wrote a tremendous sefer. But I'm saying, over talking. But you're right, you can't talk to your wife, nothing wrong. I'm just saying, the Shavuot says this is what you should be learning the night of Yom Kippur. Tshuva is so great, brings healing to the world. And by the way, Rashi says that it means like this: when a person does tshuva, Hashem helps doctors and scientists discover new forms of medication. So you do tshuva, you're creating new healing in the world. Rav Chama Bar Chanina Yomi, he asks the question, come back, those who have gone to Shevavim means have gone astray, to because Shovim that you are gone astray, but now you come back, you're on the right path. And heal you. Whenever you heal someone, what happens is there's always a scar after every operation. So is it like that there's a scar left, or is there no scar left? Is it completely healed? If it's done with love, there's nothing left, no remnants left of the sin. If it's done from fear, there is remnants. It says the word sons, bonim shovavim, sons that have gone astray. That's a lashon expression of love, right? I'll be your master. Balim, Baalti bochem is lashon balim. Balim is the owner. So I'll be your owner, and I'll take one from a city, two from a family. So you see over here that Hakadosh treats us as a master to a servant, not like a father to a son. If it's from love and fear, then Hashem treats us like a son. Where Hakadosh was made to suffer, and only through the suffering have we done tshuva, so that is much worse. I believe tshuva is so great that it makes a person reach kisei hakavod. Means a person reaches dagas which under normal circumstances you can't reach. Add Hashem lekecha all the way to Hashem your God. Top of Pevav on Beis. Now the Bach has a gilsa over here. Now the Bach adds that the Gemara asks a question that you go even further than the kisei hakavod. That when the person does tshuva, he goes past the kisei hakavod and he gets even closer, whatever that means. The Bach adds it, and the Bach says that the Gemara says that's only if it does tshuva as a community. An individual only gets the kisei hakavod. But as a community, well, by the way, that if a person does tshuva as a community, you get past the kisei hakavod, whatever that means. If a person divorces his wife and then she marries someone else, is he allowed to remarry afterwards? No. So to speak, divorced us. We now have strayed and gone to other gods, and then when we do tshuva, it brings us back. So the tshuva is so great that Hashem, so to speak, goes against the laws of the Torah to bring us back. Can you go back to him? The land would become full of znus. The Shuva Elai Hashem says, come back to me. Hashem says, I don't care about the Torah. If you do tshuva, I go against the laws of the Torah and I let you come back to me, even though you've already gone to another man, which would normally be forbidden. When people do tshuva, that brings the Mashiach. Things they did on purpose, as if he did by mistake. Means you have stumbled in your sins. Stumbling is something which you've done by mistake. So here we see that in our day, once a person does tshuva, it's as if he did by mistake. However, in Mezidu, always means Mezid. But it says a Michshol is a vaya that when a person does tshuva, it becomes a mistake. Then Aveya becomes like a mitzvah, not like a b'shoigeg. He will live. That through the Aveyas that he did, he now gets merit. When a person does now tshuva ma'ava, the actual Aveya becomes a schus for them. So many times in the Shashim, the Medrash says it, a person can never have done a single mitzvah in his lifetime, only Aveyas, and the end of his life be packed full with mitzvahs. How is that possible? If he did Aveyas his whole lifetime, then he did Shuvah Me'ava, so now he's stuffed full of mitzvahs without ever having done a mitzvah. Now, why is it? Why is Shuvah Me'ava? So there's two explanations. One is from the Marshal. The Marshal says like this: Shuvah Me'ava means that, let's say, the pain of the Aveyah is so upsetting that I've gone away from Hashem, the yearning to Hashem, so the Aveyah causes a person to behave better than he would have. Meaning, for example, let's say a spouse goes away. And then what happens is, because the absence makes the heart grow fonder, a person's so desperate to bring them back. When they come back, they're extra good, they behave better. So what happens is that Aveyah makes a distance. When a person realizes the loss of that distance, and therefore he decides, I can't bear that distance, so that Aveyah actually caused him to behave better. The Tisra Kippurim says, very nice, stronger. And the Tisra Kippurim says that when a person's done an Aveyah, it's very hard to stop himself. As we'll see in a minute, that more times doing Aveyah, the more you get used to it. So if a person does tshuva, he has to show more self-control. So therefore, that extra self-control is what makes it as if he's done a mitzvah. Makes a person live a long time. Live a long time. Is not like a human being. We're up to now the first of the very wide lines on Pevav and Beis. If a person hurts somebody's feelings, it's not guaranteed that the person will forgive. The person may never forgive. Even if a person forgives, even if he forgives, he might say, look, you hurt me. I want you to do something for me. Give me money, give me a present, do something for me. But just saying sorry might not work. So first there's an aver in private, meaning even though he's trying to hide the aver from Hashem, which is extra chutzpah, Hashem is appeased just through words. Just say a few words. Hashem looks at it as if done it a favor. If you do that there, all you do is say words. Hashem immediately forgives, and not only he forgives, he looks at it as if you've done him a favor. And take good as if you've done something good to Hashem. The pasuk, the Torah refers to it as if you bought a korban. It's as if you paid with your lips for the cows. Maybe it's like just giving that which you're obligated, meaning it's the barest necessity. Hashem loves them as if it's a gift. So if a person does tshuva, it's very, very, very precious and nice. Hashem can understand when the Shmuel says he should read this night Yom Kippur. Because really, to a certain extent, the whole avodah Yom Kippur is tshuva. A person has to have the awareness of how valuable it is. If I told you I've got a pillow here, you have it once a month, you'll feel well the entire month, then you buy it for hundreds of pounds. So if a person has an appreciation of what the value of tshuva is, then the person will be willing to invest in it much more. If one person does tshuva, we forgive the entire world. My anger has gone away from him. Mimenu is in the singular. And the pasuk says, which is in the plural. So Hashem forgives the plural sin because of the fact that one person did tshuva. What exactly is about tshuva? That what happened was he went through that same avera twice, and he was saved from it, that he did not repeat it. That it was the same woman that he did that avera the last time. Perek means that time of the year, and mokoim and that place. Rashi says perek means that time of the year. It seems that certain people, like go to the middle of the winter, get certain kind of feelings. Your feelings change, beginning of spring. The emotions change with the seasons. So it has to be a replication of this time you did the avera. The Rambam though says perek means in that strength of behavior. That means when that person, not the time of the year, but that kind of feeling that the person had. Like if a person felt a huge urge, when their huge urge came back, but not, it's a similar idea, just in Diktuk Rashi says perek means that time of year, Rambam says perek means that kind of feeling. What's the good words for it? That desire. Okay. Yomi asks a contradiction. Praises the one who hides his sins and covers his sin. Some who hides his sins will not be success, will not succeed. If everybody knows did the avera, the correct thing to do is to publicly ask for tshuva. But if nobody did the avera, and you get up in shul and stand up and say, I did this and this and that, you're actually weakening people because they're finding out that you did averas and they didn't need to know about it. You should not tell people, because what happens is, why are you telling people that you've done things wrong against Hashem? You should, because that will appease the person more. If I hurt your feelings and I publicly say, I hurt so-and-so's feelings, that creates a certain more of a tshuva than any other. In the Ma'isa, there's two answers in the Gemara when you should hide that there, when not. One answer is it depends. If it's very public, then you should publicly do tshuva. Another answer is it depends if it's not mokim. Some of the Rishonim only pass on the second answer, and some pass on both answers. The Shulchan Aruch and the Rabbi himself And Hilchos Yom Kippurim discusses these two answers and discusses whether we have to continue both. For example, what would happen in a case where a person did an Avera, which nobody knows about it, but it was ben Adam Lachaveiro. Should you reveal it or not? It depends if you're like the first answer, the second answer. Mechaber brings a machlekes. Tana Beis person Avera once we forgive him shnia mechlino shlishis mechlino. Reveals a full time ein mechlino. Shnema kema Hashem ashlish b'sheisol val avore ashivenu for the full time. I want to learn into the tshuva. But then there's another pasuk in Kaleva Yifal Kei Pamim Sholishim Geva. Pamim Sholishim Geva. Hashem said to Yehuda that Hashem, so to speak, deals with a person 2-3 times. Like sometimes you have like a boss, the first time the worker gets it wrong, fires him. You have sometimes a much better boss that will work with the worker again and again and again. So Hashem says to Yehuda, I keep trying with a person 2-3 times, I keep trying to get him to go in the right direction. Why do you have 2 psukim to tell us the same principle that Hashem forgives 3 times? That the first pasuk is about the civil, there the pasuk is about a whole nation. That Hashem will even with an individual attempt again and again to get the person to do tshuva. You should not do video again. If you did that again, you do need to do tshuva again. So if you haven't done Avera again this year, so you shouldn't do a video on that. And there's a very famous letter which was written to the Rambam, that somebody wrote to the Rambam, unbelievable, it's in the Pei Adoy, that I can't say video this year on Yom Kippur because I haven't done any Averos. So what should I do? The Sefer Pei Adoy, the Rambam writes back that if you were to know what it is to serving Hashem, you would come to the realization that you've done all the Averos. Because in every Avera there's certain levels which you haven't reached, and he says to him, anyway, it could very well be that you've got from previous days, etc. But Beis says you should do tshuva. Beis the more says you haven't done. You do a video again. I love it. Like a dog goes back to his sick where he threw up, a fool goes back to his foolishness. Whereas it's better to do tshuva even if you've never done Avera again. If a person does Avera once, he does it a second time, it becomes permitted. It's permitted to do an Avera if you've done it twice. Could that be? And even Nasis says if it became mutter. I'll just say a couple of points. There's a machlekes a tanoim over here. If you never did an Avera this year, whether you should do tshuva. The Mechaber paskins, you should do tshuva. So let's say 20 years ago, you by mistake ate something not kosher. You could do tshuva every single year on that. Mishnah Bo passes like that. There are others that do argue with this Mishnah Bo. Mishnah Bo passes like this. Once mentioned Ben Yomi and Shavit Tshuva towards the end, he says it's not so good because it makes as if that the only Averos you can think of are the old Averos if you haven't done anything recently. That's one point. There's another point over here. The Gemara over here says that when the person is B'yash. The Gemara over here says that if a person does an Avera twice, Hutvelo became permitted. And the Gemara asks the question, Hutvelo really became permitted? It's not permitted to do an Avera twice. Or the Nasis Lekeheta, it says if it's permitted, because once you get used to a habit, we are very strong. So if a person speaks Lashon Hara once, and he speaks twice, it becomes permitted, doesn't think it's so bad. The first time he feels very bad, it's not so bad. Lemaisa. This same Gemara comes up 5 times in Shas. The exact same words comes up 5 times, the exact sentence. The Gemara says that first is an Avera, and he does it again, it becomes permitted. And the Gemara says, really, it becomes permitted? And the Gemara says, no, it's as if it became permitted in his eyes. In the Sefer Krich Ve'oy, for Mitzvah Blazer, who was a Talmud of Yisroel Salanta, the main Talmud of Salanta, he says the Gemara over here, especially every time, brings the mistaken understanding and then the correct understanding. Why? That you should be realized just how terrible repeating an Avera is. It is so terrible that the Gemara every time mistakenly thinks that if you've done it twice, it is actually permitted. And he says that what happens is the first time a person does an Avera, he feels tremendous guilt. No, the very first time you got argued with your wife, like you feel terrible about it. Once that happens the second and the third time, then what happens is you don't feel the same. It's a reality, unfortunately. And the Gemara over here says that that's a terrible thing. And he says, therefore, to be Eika, that feeling, that is the Avera. Of course it is. Nice, it's a very powerful, it's the back of the Sefer Yisroel. where he discusses this point that once that means the Gemara makes as if 5 times the Gemara comes to mistake, as if once you've done Avera, it's very interesting. If you think about the first time you did something wrong, how bad you felt. By the time it's the second time, he says, if that's the first and the second time, imagine if it's the second and the third and the third and the fourth. And by the time you've done it 20 times, then you think to yourself, it's a mitzvah. Oh, that's says the Gemara. Now the Gemara tells us a bit of how to do vidu. You should specify the sin. You shouldn't specify the sin. And why did Moshe point out the sin? It's your fault. You saw the silver and the gold that you increased with Kalisol. Until they said we've got too much, go on and cause them that they should make gods of gold. It says Machlekes whether they should specify the sin. The Maisa we pass that you do specify the sin. So the person does an Avera, he should say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I did the following sin, and he has to say what the sin was. That's the Nusach of Shiur. Now the Gemara says, there were 2 great leaders, Moshe and David. Moshe my Avera should be written. Rashi says it's a number of places in the Torah. Shenema, I want to be like the Sheni. Moshe what was his Avera? He hit the rocks. Moshe died in the mitzvah. Now, there was a lot of people died in the mitzvah. The whole of Christ died in the mitzvah. Why did the whole of Christ die in the mitzvah? Because of the Chitim Meraglim. Moshe Rabbeinu did not want that people should think that the reason why he is also dying in the mitzvah is because of the same Averos in the Meraglim. So Moshe Rabbeinu asked that every single time he talks about Moshe Rabbeinu dying, being nifta, it should also mention that Avera he did. That people shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that he was also part of the Meraglim. Because the Avera was that he was with Bathsheba. What's comparable? And Rashi mentions this as well. There's 2 women get markets a basin. Achas kilkala, one did znus. The achas, and one of them, ochlo page shvius. She ate fruit of shvius which were not completely ready. The halacha is on the year of Shemitah, you're not allowed to waste the fruit. Now, if you've got figs and they're not ripe, and you eat them when they're not ripe, so then you're ruining the fruit of Shemitah. Why are you ruining the fruit of Shemitah? Because they're meant to be eaten ripe, and you eat them not ripe, so you're ruining the fruit of Shemitah. Blash asks the question, what kind of ruining is it? It's already been plucked off the tree. If it's already plucked off the tree, what's going to happen to this fig? It's never going to be eaten. At least you ate it. So he says it's a proof over here that it must be possible that after a fig comes off the tree, it's still possible to make it ripe at a later stage. It's something that bananas sometimes, because get in the green. Right. So nice if you eat them when it's wrong, but it's a very important halacha that you have to use fruit. For example, on the years of Shemitah, if you take a fruit that's not meant to be squeezed and you squeeze it, then you chai malchus. Did you hear such a thing? If you take the fruit of Shemitah and you squeeze them and not meant to be squeezed because it's not a normal way to eat the fruit, then you chai malchus because you're ruining the fruit. So this is coming up Shemitah. Oh, grapes you can. The one who ate package shvis, the fruit of Shemitah, but by Koshmi can I beg of you, let everybody know why I'm getting markers. They shouldn't say the reason why she's getting markers. If you package shvis, they took those fruits, they're hung like a necklace around the neck. She's getting markers because of Shemitah, not because she was Mazan. The fastness of Hanifim Teichil Hashem. Those who pretend to do mitzvahs but really are wicked, you have to advertise the fact that they're wicked. Otherwise, it causes chil Hashem. Rashi says there are 2 kinds of chil Hashem. One chil Hashem is somebody who pretends to be a tzaddik and really is a rasha. What will happen to him? He'll suffer terrible fate, says Rashi. And then when he suffers, people will say, how can he be that tzaddik is suffering? So Rashi says by telling everybody that he's a rasha, when he starts suffering, people will not be upset with HaKadosh Baruch Hu for his suffering. Interesting Rashi. It's fascinating for Rashi. Another pshat Rashi says is that if everybody doesn't realize he's a rasha and he pretends to be a tzaddik, one day he'll do something bad, and people will think that that's what we should be learning from, because they'll see and they'll think to themselves, this is a tzaddik to learn from. So if there's a mitzvah to advertise and tell people so-and-so is not a tzaddik, and that's why he gets his punishment later in life, and don't learn from him. When the tzaddik does wickedness, I'll put a stumbling block in front of him. That's a pasuk in Yecheskel, that Hashem says to Yecheskel, when the person does Avera, then what will happen is, I will put a stumbling block. That means I'll show him up and I'll make him do things wrong that he'll do that he'll get it wrong. Rashi points out, Rashi says an ancient point. The Gemara says in Tanis that if a person did not have the help of Hashem, it would be impossible for him to conquer the Yisroel, right? And therefore he says like this, all Shmuel says to a person is, you want my help, so then you've got to be genuine. If you're not genuine, you're not going to get my help. And therefore what happens is, somebody who pretends to be someone Hashem is not, so then Hashem takes away his help, and then he ends up tripping up against his Yisroel, and everybody sees his badness. Tshuvas amuchlotin, the tshuva of those who are properly wicked, ma'akeves haparonos. If a properly wicked person does tshuva, that stops punishment from to Klal Yisrael. Even if there was a gzar din was signed, if people do tshuva, Hashem reps up the sign. Shavas v'shoim, the peace of the wicked, seifat takala causes harm. That means when Rishoim have nothing to worry about, they start doing averos. So it's good for Rishoim to have problems on their minds. But Rishus, being in power, being a Rav, being in positions of leadership, mekaberes espalea, causes the people to die young. Rashi always says this example that Yosef Tzaddik died the youngest of all the brothers because he was the king. Oh, nichnas lo avon yitzir meno. If a person gets into power, he brings nothing with, and he gets nothing out of it. Because what happens is when a person gets thrown out of power, he's got nothing to show for it. If only that he should come out of it with as little sins as he came into it. Positions of authority can be a terrible michshol, stumbling block for people. Rav, the Gemara says, because a little bit connected, Rav when Rav would go to the basin to judge, he would say like this, with the desire of his own life, is going out to be killed. Because by passing incorrectly, a person gets a terrible punishment. So he's willingly going to a position where he's about to harm himself. And he's not doing what his family wants because not even anything a panosa from it. The Beis is going to come empty-handed, or only when he comes home, he should be as empty from sin as the day as when he went out to judge. It means Rav on the way to Pascha would say phrases that would remind him of the terrible dangers of judging incorrectly, that what terrible harm can come to it. When he would come out to judge, and Yoma says exactly the same words. In fact, some people change the gilsa and they miss it out. But that is how the now Gemara's got it. Top of his animal, the desire of his life, he goes out to be killed. With Beis is not doing what his family wants. He goes empty-handed. If only he should come home as little with sin as he came out. Oh, this Kirch mentions this Gemara as well. That's in the beginning, in the first chapter. When Rav, or some say it was Rava, would see the crowds following him. There were the Gedolei Adon. Imagine you're the Gedolei Adon, and you got the crowds following you. What would you say to yourself? What did he say? This is the words he said. Oma. This pasuk is actually in Navadia. Sorry, it's in Iyov. I thought in Navadia. It's in Iyov. And it's referring to how Rishoim eventually lose all the success. There's a similar pasuk in that. If his pride goes up all the way to the heavens, the Rosh and his head reaches the clouds, like his excrement, Lenetzach Yovad will be lost forever. Roy of those who see him, Yomi, they'll say, where's he gone? That means when Rabbi was walking and he would see crowds following him, he would say to himself that just like Hashem said to you about Rishoim, that even if you reach to be so big and so tall that your head reaches the clouds and you're reaching all the way to the stars, but you should know that he will be lost like excrement and that people will one day say, where is he gone? We can't see him. What's the idea? Why did he say that? To keep himself humble. So again, Mr. Blazer writes in the first parak of Yisroel, he writes, this is where Mr. Salanta got the whole idea of Limud HaMusa. Before Mr. Salanta came, did people learn Musa? Of course they did. What did the Chavos was writing Sefer for? What did the Shai wrote? Of course they learned it. Well, he came along and said, it's not enough to learn this form, but you have to know how to apply and to repeat these words again and again. It's what called affirmations. It's actually becoming quite popular in modern day therapy, positive affirmations. The affirmation that he repeated to himself as he was being accompanied by people was that if you reach the stars, one day you'll be like thrown away and discarded and like nothing. Just to remind himself, he says, that's the avodah Muslim, that the person, it's not enough to read something once. You have to constantly repeat the words that found it difficult to walk. So what would happen is they would carry him into the Beis Medrash on the Shabbos before Yom Tov, he would give a big drasha. He would say, not forever is he going to have power, and his crown will not last from generation to generation. Full stop. It goes like this. Showing favor to a wicked person, that's not good for him. It's not good for a wicked person that he should be shown favor in this world to have success. Why? It wasn't good for Achav that Hashem was favored him. What happened was that Achav did a semi-sort of tshuva. What happened to him? Hashem gave him another 22 years of kingdom. But Achav is one of the few people that in Mabo. So did it do him good to be shown favor in this one? No. So that's pshat in the pasuk. It's not good for a Rasha that he should be shown favor in this world. But for a tzaddik, it is good that his justice should be tilted, meaning that he should be judged harshly. It's good for the tzaddikim that they don't have favor in this world. It was good for him that Hashem judged him harshly. Really, they should not have been died. Moshe shouldn't have died, but the fact is because he suffered, so therefore that way he got into the Mabo, we completed, and that's mind of Nochvish Gamzu. That one time his Talmidim came in and they saw that he was missing hands, legs, and his entire body was covered in boils, and he was blind. And why did he get all of this? Anybody remember? He didn't feed the poor man quickly, and because of that, the poor man died. So he asked for all of these, and they all said to him, "Woe to us that we've seen such a terrible fate." And he said, "How lucky I am that I got it that way. I should be able to." So the Father Gemara said it was good for Moshe Rabbeinu, so to speak, to suffer this fate that he shouldn't say more about it. Praise the tzaddikim. Not only do they succeed on their own account, but they even give us chus to their children forever. Aaron deserved that all his sons should die. Because the pasuk says about not the someone and his son that were left over. Left over means they were meant to be consumed, but they remained behind. And the chus of the father stood for them in good stead. Not only they cause themselves harm, he had many children that really deserved to be a position of a bonus, like Tovi. And the ideas of the father caused them that they should not have that success. So you see that the chus of a father lasts for many generations, and the ideas of a father last for many generations. The Medrash says that Klaisel compared to a vineyard. If you ever see a vineyard, how does a vineyard stand? You always have to have lots of poles to keep it going, trestles and things like that. That Klaisel can never stand on their own. You have to have the support. And what's the support is the previous service, and that's the marshal of the sticks. Okay, we'll come to another time. A person who's Rabbi doesn't have any avir, will not get avir. Something that causes harm will not be able to do tshuva. We don't want him to be in Gehenna. You don't want him to be able to even go to see the shachas is referring to Gehenna, the pit. They will not even be able to support him. Meaning that if a person does mitzvahs, but his talmidim go to Gehenna because of his influence, then they will not even support him to help him get into Gan Eden. They'll send him straight into Gehenna. And the idea is because it was his job to make sure that his talmidim shouldn't get into Gehenna. In fact, that he didn't. He loses out. Yoma, should stop here? Okay, so we'll stop here. I'll just say very briefly, the Chavetz Chaim once came to Kehillah and he asked them to try and get a mikveh in town. And he said no, they couldn't afford it. So he said to them, he came back, he said, I have to have one request, that I want a letter from you, that I don't want to be the ones that you all go to Gehenna, and I don't want to be dragged in with you. So I want a letter from you that I did my very best to convince you. I shouldn't have this, what the Gemara over here says, that if a person's got his talmidim going to Gehenna, then he himself can't get into Gan Eden and get dragged in with. Well, after he asked for such a letter, you can imagine that if money was found from the Tomorrow night is